I'm William, 28 male. I live alone in a city that's 1,000 miles away from anyone I used to know, working in a field I spent nearly a decade of my life preparing for. My life now is quiet, ordered, and entirely my own, built from the ashes of a family that never truly saw me. This is the story of how I traded a lifetime of being second best for a future where I was finally the priority. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Growing up, our house was less of a home and more of a stadium, and my younger brother Jake was always the main event. I was the quiet, studious older brother, the one who lived in the background. My existence was a muted hum beneath the roar of the crowd that was my family's adoration for Jake. My dad, Richard, a man whose pride was measured in sports trophies, saw Jake as his legacy. My mom, Eleanor, saw him as her star, the charismatic, athletic son who collected friends and accolades as easily as I collected books. I was the footnote in the family newsletter, the "Oh, and William is doing well in school" part of the conversation. My achievements were met with a polite, almost absent-minded nod. A perfect score on a math final. That's nice, honey. Did you hear Jake scored the winning touchdown, winning the state science fair? Wonderful. William will celebrate after Jake's baseball tournament this weekend. The celebration never came. It was always deferred for a more important game, a more significant team dinner, a more pressing social event for Jake. I learned early on not to expect the spotlight. My space was the library, my accolades were scholarships and academic grants that my parents barely seemed to register, other than to say it was good that I was saving them money. I funded my own undergraduate degree through a patchwork of these awards and part-time jobs, while Jake's expensive sports camps and top-of-the-line equipment were considered non-negotiable family expenses. My dad once sat me down to explain the family budget, showing me spreadsheets and talking about tightening our belts, just a week before he proudly announced he'd bought Jake a new, professional-grade lacrosse stick that cost more than my textbooks for an entire semester. "It's an investment in his future," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You understand, right, buddy? You're the practical one." I understood perfectly. I was practical, responsible William. Jake was the dream. My role was to be self-sufficient, to not cause trouble, to not have needs that would conflict with the grand project of Jake's athletic career. This dynamic solidified as I moved on to my master's program and then my PhD in biomedical engineering. The physical distance of being at a university hours away should have been liberating, but the emotional dynamic stretched unbroken. My calls home were always rerouted to Jake's latest achievements. "Your brother might go pro, William. Can you imagine?" My mom would gush, her voice crackling with an excitement I'd never heard directed at me. During these years, the only person who seemed to see my work for what it was my PhD advisor, Dr. Anya Sharma. She was brilliant, demanding, and saw the potential in my research on neural interfaces. "William," she told me during a grueling late-night session in the lab, "this work isn't just good, it's revolutionary. You are on the cusp of something that will change lives." Her belief in me was a lifeline. She became the mentor and parental figure I'd always craved. She'd ask about my progress, celebrate my successful trials, and most importantly, she listened. When I published my first paper in a major scientific journal, she brought a bottle of champagne to the lab. My own parents sent a text, "Congrats, Jake's team is in the semifinals." As I neared the end of my doctorate, the finish line of a 9-year academic marathon, I felt a flicker of hope. A PhD was different. It was the highest degree one could achieve. Surely this was an event that couldn't be overshadowed by a seasonal sports tournament. This was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. My university announced the graduation ceremony months in advance. I booked a nice hotel for my parents and brother, planning a celebratory dinner at the best restaurant in town. I emailed them the itinerary, a detailed plan for what I hoped would be the one weekend that was unequivocally about me. My mom's response was a phone call. "Oh, honey, this all looks lovely," she'd said, and I felt my chest swell with a dangerous amount of optimism. "But we need to talk about the date." I could hear the but coming like a freight train. She explained that Jake's college baseball team, against all odds, had made a deep run in the postseason. The regional playoffs were scheduled for the exact same weekend as M. "Why graduation? It's the regionals, William," she'd said, her voice filled with a breathless importance. "We just have to be there for him." I stood in my small apartment, staring at the wall, the silence stretching between us. I had spent years becoming an expert in complex systems, but the simple, brutal calculus of my family's priorities still managed to stun me. I was the stable, predictable variable. Jake was the exciting, unpredictable one, and in the equation of my family's love and attention, excitement always won. "So you're not coming?" I asked, my voice flat. My dad got on the extension line. It's not that we don't want to, son. It's the regionals. Your brother is counting on us. You're so independent, you've always understood. I didn't understand, not anymore. For years, I had accepted my role. I was the background character, the supporting actor. I had told myself it didn't matter, that my success was my own reward. But in that moment, the lie I had been telling myself for 2 decades crumbled. It did matter. I wanted my parents to be there. I wanted them for once to choose me. I wanted them to see me walk across that stage, to be introduced as Dr. William, and to feel a fraction of the pride for me that they felt when Jake hit a home run. I had been invisible for so long, and I realized with a crushing certainty that I would remain invisible even at the brightest moment of my life. The week leading up to my graduation was a blur of frantic activity and a hollow feeling in my gut. I was finalizing my dissertation defense, fielding calls from recruiters, and trying to ignore the gaping hole where my family's support should have been. The hotel reservation I'd made for them remained a bitter reminder on my credit card statement until I finally canceled it. The polite, "We're sorry to see you go," from the receptionist feeling like a cosmic joke. I tried to rationalize it. It was just a ceremony, a formality. The real achievement was the work itself, the years of research, the successful defense of my thesis. Dr. Sharma had been ecstatic, calling my defense masterful. She was organizing a small party for me with some other faculty members. I had her, I had my colleagues, that should be enough. But it was. The phone call came 2 days before the ceremony. It was my mom, Alina, her voice a symphony of cheerful self-absorption. "Hi, honey, just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. We're all so excited for Jake's big game tomorrow." I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. I pictured them packing the car, wearing Jake's team colors, making signs, their faces alight with anticipation. The same energy they couldn't muster for my graduation was being poured into a college baseball game. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. It was a skill I had perfected over a lifetime. "Oh good, now I know we can't be there," she continued, the words tumbling out without a hint of apology. "But we'll be thinking of you. Your dad and I are so proud. We were just saying, our William a doctor, isn't that something?" It felt like she was reading from a script, ticking a box labeled "Call the other son." "We'll make it up to you, I promise. As soon as the season is over, we'll have a big family dinner to celebrate you and Jake." A joint celebration, of course. My doctorate, the culmination of nearly a decade of grueling intellectual labor, would be served as a side dish to Jake's athletic season. I would get a pat on the back at the same dinner where Jake would be regaling everyone with tales of his on-field heroics. The sheer, unthinking selfishness of it was breathtaking. "That's okay, Mom," I heard myself say. The words felt foreign, like they were being spoken by someone else. A strange, cold calmness was washing over me. It was the kind of clarity that comes when something has been broken beyond repair. "Don't worry about it." "Oh, you're such a good son, always so understanding," she chirped. "We just have to miss your graduation, honey. Your brother's team made the regional playoffs." She said it with the same cheerful finality as someone explaining that the sky is blue. It wasn't a choice to be debated, it was a fact to be accepted. And in that moment, I did accept it. I accepted it all. I accepted that I would never be the priority. I accepted that their love was conditional and that I didn't meet the conditions. I accepted that my entire life had been a quiet audition for a role I was never going to get. The anger I expected to feel wasn't there. It was replaced by a profound, liberating sense of detachment. It was the final straw, but instead of breaking my back, it simply severed the rope that had tied me to them. "Okay, Mom," I said, and for the first time it was the complete truth. I was okay, not because I wasn't hurt, but because the hurt had finally cauterized itself. "Have fun at the game." "We will, sweetie, we'll be cheering loud enough for you to hear us," she said with a laugh. "Break a leg, or whatever you do at those things, we love you." "I know," I said and hung up the phone. I did not say "I love you too." It felt like the first honest thing I had failed to say to them in my entire life. I turned back to my laptop. Open on the screen was an email I had been staring at for the past day. It was from a leading biotech firm on the West Coast, a company I had dreamed of working for. They had been aggressively recruiting me for months, ever since my first paper was published. The email was a formal offer, a senior research scientist position, a salary that made my eyes water, a generous relocation package, full creative control over my own research lab. It was the validation I had been seeking my entire life, not from my family, but from the world I actually wanted to be a part of. The job started in 3 weeks. It would mean packing up my entire life, moving across the country, and leaving everything behind. A few days ago, the thought had terrified me, leaving the familiar, being so far from family, even a family like mine. But after that phone call, it no longer felt like leaving anything behind. It felt like running towards everything I'd ever wanted. I took a deep breath. I thought of the empty chairs at the graduation ceremony. I thought of the joint celebration dinner. I thought of my mom's cheerful, dismissive voice. Then I thought of Dr. Sharma's proud smile, the state-of-the-art lab waiting for me, and the chance to build a life where my achievements were the main event. I clicked reply, my fingers flew across the keyboard. Dear Ms. Jennings, I wrote, thank you for your generous offer. I am delighted to formally accept the position of Senior Research Scientist. I look forward to joining the team. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. The decision was made. The final straw hadn't broken me, it had set me free. My graduation wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. And I would be attending it alone, not as a son but as Dr. William, a man with a future that was finally, completely his own. The graduation ceremony was a surreal experience. I sat among hundreds of my peers, a sea of black robes and hopeful faces. When they called my name, Dr. William, the applause from the audience felt distant, impersonal. Dr. Sharma was there, beaming from the faculty section, and her pride was a warm, steadying presence. She was the only person in the entire stadium whose opinion mattered to me that day. As I walked across the stage and shook the university president's hand, I didn't search the crowd for my family. For the first time, I wasn't looking for them. I felt a pang of sadness for the boy who had desperately wanted them there, but he felt like a ghost, a past version of me I was rapidly leaving behind. The 2 weeks between that day and my move were a whirlwind of logistics. I sold my cheap furniture, packed my books and lab notes into dozens of boxes, and methodically dismantled the life I had built over the past 9 years. I didn't call my family to tell them about the job. I didn't call to tell them I was moving. The silence that had once been a source of pain was now a protective shield. They were at Jake's tournament, which his team ultimately lost in a dramatic final inning. My mom sent a long, rambling text about the unfair umpire and how proud she was of Jake for handling the heartbreak so maturely. I replied with a simple, sorry to hear that. My last act before handing in the keys to my apartment was to visit my mobile phone provider. I ported my old number to a burner SIM card, which I then put into an old phone and tossed into a drawer. I walked out with a new phone, a new plan, and a new number from a completely different area code. It felt like the final, definitive step. Changing my number wasn't just about avoiding their calls, it was a symbolic act. They no longer had a direct line to me. The access I had so freely given them my entire life was now revoked. Landing on the West Coast was like stepping into a different dimension. The air was different, the light was different, and the opportunities felt boundless. The biotech firm Neurogen had set me up in a corporate apartment for the first month, a sleek, modern space with panoramic views of the city. It was more luxurious than any place I had ever lived. My lab was even better. It was a scientist's dream, filled with state-of-the-art equipment that I had only read about in journals. They gave me a team of 2 junior researchers, and a budget that made me feel like they had made a clerical error. My boss, a sharp, energetic woman named Dr. Evans, greeted me on the first day with a firm handshake. "We've been following your work for years, William," she said, her expression serious. "We believe your research on neural interfaces As the future, we're giving you the resources because we trust your vision. Welcome to NeuroGen." Validation was overwhelming. Here I was, Jake's practical older brother. I was Dr. William, a valued expert, a visionary. I threw myself into my work with a singular focus I had never been able to achieve before. The constant low-level hum of anxiety about my family was gone. There were no weekend calls to navigate, no passive-aggressive comments to deflect, no upcoming family events to dread. My mind was clear. My research accelerated at a pace that stunned even me. We made a breakthrough in our first 6 months that pushed the boundaries of what we thought was possible with brain-computer interfaces. I made friends, not just colleagues, but actual friends, people who were interested in my life, my thoughts, my hobbies. I started hiking on the weekends, exploring the dramatic coastline. I joined a book club. I started dating, cautiously at first, then with a growing confidence I'd never had. I was building a life piece by piece that was rich and fulfilling. For the first time, I felt like the main character in my own story. Dr. Sharma and I kept in touch. I called her every few weeks to update her on my progress. She was my only link to my old life, but it was a link I cherished. "I knew you would thrive once you were free of that environment," she told me during one call. "Some plants can't grow in the shade, William. You were always meant for the sun." She never asked about my family, and I was grateful for her tact. She understood. My new life was a world away from the old one, not just geographically, but emotionally and psychologically. I was breathing different air, thinking different thoughts. The ghost of the invisible sun still lingered some days, a faint whisper of inadequacy in the back of my mind, but his voice was growing weaker. He was being replaced by a man who was respected, valued, and most importantly, happy. I had accepted the six-figure job, I had relocated, I had changed my number. And in doing so, I had changed my life. I was finally home. For the first year, the silence was absolute. I had my new number, and my old one was attached to a cheap phone I kept powered off in a desk drawer. I never checked it. I had no social media presence under my real name, a habit from my focused academic years that now served as an invaluable privacy tool. From my family's perspective, I had simply vanished. I imagined their initial reactions would have been annoyance rather than concern. I was the reliable one. I was supposed to be there, waiting in the wings, ready to answer when they eventually decided to call. The first crack in my silent world came through Dr. Sharma. It had been about 18 months since my move. She called me one evening, her voice hesitant. "William, I received a rather strange email today," she said. "It was from your mother." My stomach tightened. What did she want? "She was asking for your contact information. She said they hadn't heard from you in over a year and were getting worried. She said your old number was disconnected." Dr. Sharma paused. I have to admit I was tempted to tell her exactly why that might be, but I told her I couldn't share your personal details without your consent. "William, are you all right?" "I'm more than all right, Anya," I said, and I meant it. "Thank you for protecting my privacy. You did the right thing." I asked her not to reply to any further emails from them, and she readily agreed. So the investigation had begun. They had finally noticed I was gone. It wasn't a 3-day or 3-week lapse anymore. It was a year and a half of radio silence. The fact that their first move was to contact my old professor, rather than showing any real investigative effort, spoke volumes. They were still operating on the assumption that I was a puzzle that could be easily solved with minimal effort. A month later, another message found its way to me, this time through my professional networking profile. It was a connection request and a message from a name I didn't recognize. The profile picture was a generic landscape. The message read, "Hi William, this is a long shot, but if you're the William who is Richard and Alina's son, please contact them. They are very worried about you." It was a flying monkey, a family friend, or a distant relative they had recruited. I stared at the message for a long time. The phrase "very worried" seemed so hollow. Where was this worry when they were choosing a baseball game over my doctorate ceremony? Where was this concern during the countless birthdays they'd glossed over or the achievements they'd ignored? Their worry wasn't for my well-being, it was for their loss of control, for the disruption of the established order. The reliable, invisible son had broken the rules. I deleted the request without a response. The silence from my end was a statement. It was a vacuum, and their frantic, clumsy attempts to fill it only highlighted its power. I imagined the conversations in their house, the initial annoyance turning to confusion, then to indignation, and finally to a manufactured sense of panic they could perform for their friends and neighbors. "Our brilliant son, the doctor, has just disappeared. We don't know what we did wrong." I could almost hear my mother's tearful, dramatic performance. The climax of their investigation came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting, presenting our team's latest data, when my phone, set on the table, buzzed with a call from an unknown number with my old hometown's area code. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. After the fifth call in less than 10 minutes, I excused myself, a sense of dread creeping in. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "William, oh my God, William, is that you?" It was my mother, her voice high-pitched with a mixture of relief and hysteria. My blood ran cold. "How did you get this number?" "It doesn't matter, we've been so worried. Why haven't you been answering your old phone? We thought something terrible had happened," she cried. The performance was in full swing. "Your father and I have been sick with worry." I remained silent, letting her frantic words hang in the air. "We called your old university, your old apartment complex. Finally, someone at your old school's alumni association took pity on us and gave us the contact information for your employer. We had to call their main HR department. Do you know how embarrassing that is, William, to have to track down your own son like a wanted man?" Embarrassing for her, that was the core of it. My disappearance was an inconvenience, a social embarrassment. It was a stain on the perfect family picture they tried to project. "I've been busy," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Busy for 18 months, you couldn't send a text, an email. William, your brother has been asking about you constantly." This was a new tactic, using Jake as a shield. He misses his big brother. "I'm in the middle of a meeting, Mother," I said, using the formal term for the first time. It felt right. "I have to go." "Don't you hang up on me," she shrieked, the faux concern instantly evaporating, replaced by the familiar tone of command. "Your father wants to speak to you." I could hear him fumbling for the phone in the background. William, what is the meaning of this? You just fall off the face of the earth after everything we've done for you. Everything they had done for me. The phrase was so absurd it was almost funny. They had provided the bare minimum, a roof and food, while emotionally investing all their resources in my brother. My success had been in spite of them, not because of them. The sound of my silence had been my peace. Their voices, now piercing that peace, were a harsh reminder of the life I had escaped. They hadn't changed, they hadn't reflected, they had simply been inconvenienced by my absence. They hadn't been worried about me, they had been worried about what my silence meant for them. And I knew with absolute certainty that I could not let them back in. The wall I had built was there for a reason. It was time to reinforce it. The phone call from my parents was a breach. It was a reminder that no matter how far I ran, the past had a way of reaching out, but it also clarified my position. My passive silence was no longer enough. I needed to draw a clear, uncrossable line. My peace was non-negotiable, and I would not allow them to disrupt it for their own emotional convenience. After the call, I immediately contacted my company's HR department. I explained that I was dealing with a private family matter and that my parents had contacted them under false pretenses to obtain my contact information. I requested that they block their numbers and not release any of my information to anyone without my explicit written consent. The HR manager, a kind and understanding woman, was appalled on my behalf. She assured me that it was a violation of their policy and that it would never happen again. She flagged my file for maximum privacy. The first brick was laid in the new wall. The next step was more direct. I took the old burner phone out of my desk drawer, charged it, and turned it on. It lit up with a cascade of notifications. Hundreds of missed calls from my parents, dozens of voicemails, a flood of text messages. I didn't listen to the voicemails or read most of the texts. I scrolled through them, watching the emotional progression from annoyed entitlement, "William, call us back. This isn't funny," to feigned concern, "Honey, we're just worried. Please let us know you're safe," to outright anger, "How dare you do this to your mother after she sacrificed so much for you." It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. But reading them now, with the distance of time and therapy, I felt nothing but a cold pity for them. They were so trapped in their own gnar. Rative that they couldn't see the reality of the situation. They weren't the victims here, they were the architects of this estrangement. I decided to send one final message. A declaration, not a conversation. I opened a new text to my mother, knowing she was the communications hub for the family. My fingers were steady as I typed. "Eleanor," I began, again using her first name to establish a new dynamic. "I am safe and well. My silence has been a deliberate choice. It is a direct consequence of a lifetime of being treated as a secondary priority in my own family, culminating in your decision to miss the most significant academic achievement of my life for a baseball game. That was the moment I realized that my emotional well-being required me to create distance." I continued, "Your recent actions, including harassing my former professor and misrepresenting a situation to my employer to get my number, have only reinforced my decision. This is not a negotiation. I am not seeking an apology. I am informing you of my boundary. Do not contact me. Do not contact my workplace. Do not send people to contact me on your behalf. I will not respond. Any future attempts to force contact will be viewed as harassment. I am living a happy and fulfilling life, and I intend to keep it that way. I wish you all the best." I didn't sign it with love, William. I didn't sign it at all. I read it over once, took a deep breath, and hit send. Then I turned the burner phone off, removed the SIM card, and broke it in half. I dropped the pieces into the trash. The line was drawn. The immediate aftermath was a profound sense of relief, followed by a wave of grief. I wasn't grieving the family I had, but the family I wished I'd had. I grieved for the young boy who just wanted his parents to be proud of him. I allowed myself to feel that sadness, to acknowledge it, and then to let it go. My therapist had taught me that healing wasn't about erasing the scars. It was about learning to live with them without letting them define you. Weeks turned into months. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. It wasn't a passive absence, it was an active, enforced peace. I knew I had done the right thing. My work at NeuroGen continued to flourish. We were preparing to enter the first phase of human trials for our neural interface, a milestone that was generating significant buzz in the scientific community. My personal life was also thriving. I was in a serious relationship with a wonderful woman, a landscape architect named Chloe, who was kind, intelligent, and funny. She knew about my family situation, and her unwavering support was a source of incredible strength. For the first time, I was building a chosen family. Dr. Sharma, Chloe, my close friends and colleagues, they were my support system. They were the ones who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges. They were the ones who saw me, the real me, not the role I had been assigned. Drawing that line in the sand was the hardest and most necessary thing I had ever done. It was the moment I fully stepped into my own authority, the moment I declared that my needs mattered. It was a painful, brutal act of self-preservation, but it was also an act of profound self-love. I had spent my life trying to earn a place at their table, only to realize that the most empowering thing I could do was to build my own and only invite those who truly deserved a seat. The unanswered calls and unread texts were not a sign of my cruelty, but a testament to my survival. I was finally free. Life continued on its new upward trajectory for the next few years. My relationship with Chloe grew serious, and we moved in together, building a home filled with laughter, mutual respect, and an absurd number of houseplants. At work, the human trials for our Phoenix project, as we'd nicknamed it, were a resounding success. Our neural interface was allowing paralyzed patients to control prosthetic limbs with a precision and fluidity that had once been the stuff of science fiction. I was no longer just Dr. William, the promising researcher. I was leading a team that was tangibly changing lives. The company was thriving, and so was I. I hadn't heard a single word from my family since I had sent that final text message 3 years prior. The line I had drawn had held. I assumed they had finally accepted the situation, or at least redirected their energy elsewhere. Jake had, according to a brief search I'd done out of morbid curiosity, failed to go pro and was now working alongside my father at the car dealership. The golden child star had faded, and he was back in his hometown, living a life far from the glory he and my parents had dreamed of. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, not satisfaction, but a strange, detached sadness for the weight of expectation he must have carried. The call came on a Saturday morning. Chloe and I were in the kitchen making breakfast, debating whether to go for a hike or spend the day at the beach. An unknown number from my old area code flashed on my screen. My immediate instinct was to decline, a conditioned reflex from years ago, but something made me pause. It had been so long. Curiosity, perhaps a foolish and dangerous thing, got the better of me. I glanced at Chloe, who gave me a supportive nod, and I stepped out onto the balcony and answered. Hello. The voice on the other end was frantic, broken. Will, is that you? It's Jake. I was so stunned to hear his voice that I couldn't speak for a moment. He sounded nothing like the cocksure, charismatic athlete I remembered. He sounded older, beaten down. Jake, how did you get my number? I found it in Mom's old address book. The one she wrote your work number in years ago. She never threw it away, he stammered. Listen, Will, I know we don't talk, and I know why, but I need you, we need you. My guard went up immediately. What's going on, Jake? His voice cracked. It's Dad, he had a stroke. A really bad one, he's in the ICU, the doctors, they're saying it's bad. Will, he's paralyzed on his left side and they don't know how much he'll recover. Mom is a mess, she's not handling it, I don't know what to do. A cold, heavy feeling settled in my stomach. A stroke. My father, Richard, the man who had always seemed so robust and in control, was now helpless in a hospital bed. The news was shocking, but the emotion I expected to feel, a rush of filial duty, of panicked concern, wasn't there. Instead, I felt a profound and unsettling stillness. I'm sorry to hear that, Jake, I said, my voice even. Sorry, he repeated, a note of disbelief in his voice. Will, I'm calling you because of who you are, what you do. You work with this stuff, right? Brains, nerves, paralysis, you're some kind of genius in that field. That's what Mom always said when she was bragging to her friends after you disappeared. Can't you help? Can you fix him? The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. After a lifetime of my work being dismissed and ignored, it was now the one thing they wanted from me. I wasn't their son, I was a resource. I was a potential miracle cure they could deploy. My mother, who couldn't be bothered to attend my graduation, had been using my career as a source of social currency, bragging about the son she had driven away. Jake, that's not how it works, I said, keeping my voice calm and clinical. My research is highly experimental. It's not a commercial therapy. It's for specific types of spinal cord injuries, not post-stroke paralysis. There are established protocols and therapies for stroke victims. He needs to be in the care of his neurologists. But you could do something, he insisted, his desperation making him aggressive. You're the best there is, you owe him, he's your father. There it was, the emotional blackmail, the appeal to a duty I had long since been released from. Owed him? For what? For a childhood spent in the shadow of my brother's ambition, for a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough, for a family that had made it clear time and time again that my worth was secondary. This was the ultimate test of the boundary I had drawn, not a text message or a nosy neighbor, but a real crisis. A life-or-death situation designed to pull me back into the vortex of their dysfunction. But my resolve, forged in years of silence and self-discovery, held firm. My father is a patient in a hospital and he has a team of doctors, I stated clearly. I am a research scientist who lives 1,000 miles away. There is nothing I can do and I will not be coming back. The silence on the other end was heavy with shock. Jake had expected me to drop everything. He had expected the invisible son to come running the moment he was finally needed. You can't be serious, he whispered. He's our dad. He is, I agreed. And Alina is your mother. You are their son, Jake. You've been the center of their world your entire life. This is your responsibility now. You are the one who is there. You are the one who has to handle it. I wasn't saying it to be cruel. It was simply the truth. They had invested everything in him. The returns on that investment were now due. He started to yell then, a torrent of guilt and anger and confusion. He called me heartless, selfish, a monster. He said I was letting my father die. I held the phone away from my ear, listening to his voice rise and fall until he ran out of breath. When he was done, I brought the phone back to my ear. Goodbye, Jake, I said, and I hung up. I stood on the balcony, the morning sun on my face, my heart beating a steady, even rhythm. I had just refused to help my dying father, and the only thing I felt was peace. It was a cold, hard, and brutal peace, but it was mine. The call went unanswered, not because I was a monster, but because I had finally learned how to save myself. After that final call from Ake, I blocked his number. I knew it was the last time I would ever speak to anyone from my biological family. The door was not just closed and locked, it had been bricked over. The finality of it was not a burden but a liberation. It was the end of a long, exhausting war, and I had finally declared my own personal victory. Chloe found me on the balcony and wrapped her arms around me. I told her about the call, about my father, about Jake's desperate manipulative plea. She listened without judgment, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm of my past. You did what you needed to do to protect yourself, she said softly, kissing my temple. That's all that matters. Her simple, unconditional acceptance was everything my family's love had never been. In the months that followed, I resisted the urge to find out what happened. I didn't search for obituaries or check for updates through the grapevine. My father, my mother, my brother, they were figures from a past life, a story that belonged to someone else. My focus was on the here and now, on Chloe, on our life together, on the groundbreaking work we were doing at NeuroGen. A year later, Chloe and I were married in a small, beautiful ceremony on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Our family was there. Chloe's parents and siblings, who had embraced me as their own, Dr. Sharma, who wiped away tears as she gave a toast, and our tight-knit group of friends who had become our tribe. There were no empty chairs, no sense of anyone missing. My family was right there with me, a chosen family forged from love, respect, and shared joy. My career continued to reach new heights. The Phoenix Project became a global sensation, featured in documentaries and medical journals. I was offered a partnership at the firm, giving me even more freedom to pursue the next frontier of biomedical research. We were helping people walk again, helping them communicate, giving them back a piece of the life they thought they had lost forever. The irony was not lost on me. My life's work was about restoration and connection, yet my own healing had required a profound act of disconnection. One evening, about 5 years after the call from Jake, Dr. Sharma came over for dinner. We were sitting on our back deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. After a while, she looked at me with a thoughtful expression. I saw something a while ago I never told you about, she said quietly. A former colleague from your old university town mentioned seeing your mother. She was working as a cashier at a grocery store. I pictured Alina, who had always been so concerned with appearances and status, her real estate career likely collapsing without my father's income and stability. I imagined her forced, polite smiles to strangers, a stark contrast to the effortless, genuine pride I saw in the faces of my own chosen family. And your brother, Dr. Sharma continued, is apparently struggling. He took over the mortgage on your parents' house but is having trouble keeping up. The golden boy is learning that life isn't a game you can win with charm alone. I processed the information. There was no surge of victory, no schadenfreude. There was only a quiet, somber acknowledgement of consequences. They had built their entire world on a fragile foundation, on the athletic potential of one son and the silent, uncomplaining support of the other. When one pillar crumbled and the other walked away, their entire structure had collapsed. Their choices had led them to their outcome, just as my choices had led me to mine. My revenge was never about watching them fail. I never plotted or schemed for their downfall. My revenge was simply my success. It was my peace. It was building a life so full and joyful that their absence was no longer a void but a prerequisite. It was my thriving career, my loving marriage, my strong friendships. It was hiking with my wife, laughing with our friends, and waking up every morning in a home filled with light, not shadows. I had accepted the job, moved across the country, and changed my number. It was a simple sequence of events, but it was the most important decision of my life. I didn't destroy my old family, I just stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I walked out of the stadium where I was never the star and built my own world where I was finally the one who mattered. My future was my own, and it was brighter than anything they could have ever imagined. And I wouldn't have traded it for anything.